Tons of people use supplements to help them get more jacked. Most of those people would legally, ethically, side effect, and health risk-wise just not use steroids. And these are all great reasons not to use steroids. But loads of these folks turn to SARMs because it's like taking a steroid but with all the bad stuff missing. The ultimate hack. But if much of the steroid bad stuff comes along for the ride, the free pass promise of SARMs all of a sudden starts to take a huge hit. Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength, and today we're going to talk about the false promise of SARMs. No, but my SARMs. To quote Abraham Lincoln, "You can pull my SARMs out of my dead, cold, wrinkled up hands." And summarily he was shot, killed over SARMs. A lot of people don't know that. A little Civil War history for you. Now, what the hell are SARMs? SARMs stand for selective androgen receptor modulators, which is a whole lot of science fancy speak for some actually quite simple shit. So here's the deal. SARMs are compounds that are supposed to act on the same receptors, the androgen receptors, that natural testosterone that's produced in your very own ovaries or testicle of some combination of both that you have. Did I say testicle singular? I meant it. Maybe you're lucky to have two functioning testicles, not me, just the one guy in my pants. I'll shut up now and get to the science. Steroids target this receptor. So does testosterone produced naturally in your body. And SARMs are going to target the same receptor. However, the idea is that SARMs preferentially target the androgen receptors, which you have in a huge variety of your cells. They're really only going to target the ones in skeletal muscle cells to get you jacked. But ideally, because they're selectively targeting an androgen receptor, they're going to target the androgen receptors in other cells of the body that cause side effects and health problems substantially less. This is supposed to give SARMs something like the anabolic drive, the muscle growth potential of steroids, but with way fewer side effects, because most of the side effects of steroids are in fact main effects just for tissues we're not concerned with. For example, when steroids do the stuff you want in your muscles, all is well. That's exactly what we want. Steroids make your muscles more jacked and increase the amount of glycogen inside them and convert their fiber type to things that get you more jacked. And it's all really, really great news. However, you have androgen receptors in a crapload of other tissues in your body. And when anabolic androgenic steroids and testosterone get into the bloodstream, they kind of target all the receptors sort of low-key in a very similar fashion. Which means what? That means the receptors in your nervous system, including your brain, get targeted, which gives you aggression and anxiety and increased stupidity and all those other great things about steroids that everyone loves so much. The prostate is also targeted. Cells in the prostate are targeted, and that gives you prostate enlargement, which is a really bad downside risk for future disease and longevity. I will say targeting the prostate volumes 1 through 5 on Pornhub, phenomenal. If you're not into that sort of thing, whatever. Try it. Blood vessels have receptors. Kidneys have receptors. Nervous system has receptors in the peripheral side, and that can lead to things, if you target all receptors evenly, things like high blood pressure, which is one of the great killers of folks that are trying to get jacked. Your hair follicles have receptors, which means hair growth on the body and face can shoot up. Notice. And hair on the head can get fucked up. Notice also. So steroids just in the old push tons of drugs through to your system and affect everything. They affect all this other stuff. And of course, the skin makes you have oily skin and have pimples. If you could just have a molecule that targeted the muscular component a ton, but everything else much less, man, you would really have something. And in the hypothetical, this is an amazing thing. You'd have very few folks in general that take steroids for their side effects. Think about how absurd that even sounds. I mean, there are some quote-unquote side effects of steroids that aren't terrible, but even in context can be not so great. So for example, most anabolic androgenic steroids, including testosterone, increase your sex drive. But sex drive increases are kind of annoying if you're not ready for them. Like you're in a shopping mall and all of a sudden you have your pants down and you're touching yourself. The police say that's unkind behavior to strangers. The judge says a lot worse things and says you can't stay at your house anymore and we have to take all of your money away. You have to be in a room with new friends for 10 years. But it's a nice place to stay, I always said. And there you can get your cock out anytime you want, no problem. So unless you're trying to go to jail for sex crimes, maybe the high sex drive is not the most fun thing in the world to experience. There's also a neurological effect of steroids, which is cool because it makes you stronger. Steroids' effect on your nervous system is to actually get more juice out of your muscles, and that's dope if you're a strength athlete. That's not a side effect. But if you're just training for jackedness, for hypertrophy, to look better naked or with clothing on, if you're at the shopping mall, they insist you wear clothes, then that extra strength actually allows you to contract your muscles so hard. And when you start taking androgenic steroids, that extra strength comes so early while your muscles and especially tendons aren't that much stronger yet. It can raise how much weight you're able to lift versus how much your anatomy can handle to such a big disparity that the probability of injury starts to be quite high. And so even the extra strength in a variety of contexts, like just pure hypertrophy training, is just a side effect, and it's not the most amazing thing in the world. Of course, not having huge effects on skin and kidneys and blood pressure and all stuff, that really is the golden fleece of SARMs and thus the promise. And multiple SARMs were developed and released some years ago over the past basically decade or two, and a lot of folks were quite excited. And they should be, because the real promise of SARMs is a big deal. Huge anabolic effects, very few other effects. But this is where the rosy, cheery part of the video ends. If you like optimism only, skip to the end, where I have more jokes probably about genital anatomy. I don't even know what jokes I'm going to make. Usually my jokes circle the drain in one particular direction. Here's the reality, folks. SARMs were tested and did in fact cause muscular anabolism in people in the research laboratory. Success. But the anabolic drive, how much total muscle growth was caused per unit dose of SARMs, was just quite low compared to similar doses or similar scale doses. Basically, safety profile, this causes nothing, this is real bad for you. You take that same scale to steroids, and scale for scale, these things didn't grow hardly as much muscle as anabolic steroids did. In fact, probably pretty similar. All right. So you're thinking, okay, well, they'll give us steroid-like gains, but since they're scaled a little off, you have to take more SARMs. No problem. Take more SARMs, get the same gains as with steroids, but with fewer side effects. However, unfortunately, if you took the SARMs, which were underpowered for muscle growth, and you scaled up the dosage enough to make them comparable to steroids, even at moderate doses, what ended up happening was the amount of side effects you get on an absolute scale at those new doses that actually grow some muscle, they were not nearly as good as hoped for. Unfortunately, things in the laboratory we discovered, liver enzymes went up, natural testosterone production was tanked, heart attack and stroke risk factors in the cardiometabolic system were assessed as still quite high, similar to what you would see with steroids of some kinds especially. And so in order to get robust effects from these SARMs of actual muscle growth that's meaningful, you'd have to take more of these already not low side effect drugs, and that's double bad. That sucks. So basically, SARMs ended up being kind of like roughly the equivalent of oral androgenic steroids like Anavar, otherwise known as Oxandrolone. But they had higher dosage requirements, and thus they actually had they had high dosage requirements, so their side effect profiles ended up being pretty comparable to drugs like Anavar. And from the pro bodybuilding coaches that I've talked to, and I always have a tentacle out this way or that way to connect with folks. For those guys, SARMs have been a bit of a letdown. And let me tell you, top pro bodybuilders and their coaches, they're the first rats to the fucking cheese to sniff out some shit that works. They'll use stuff way ahead of everyone else. If it works, they'll use it. If it doesn't quite work as well as what they're using, they just don't bother with it, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters on a pro bodybuilding stage is, do you have more muscle and less fat? Period. Even side effects they'll eat in case they have a huge output on the plus side. Most pro bodybuilders, after years and years and years of this being on the market, they just don't use SARMs. One guy that you should almost certainly follow, Joe at Physique Collective and on Instagram, and it's easy to find on the internet. Super, super smart guy from the United Kingdom. Coaches tons of top pros, gets everyone shredded and lean, all that stuff, but he's also health and safety focused. And I talked to him extensively about SARMs, and he was like, he just gave me one of these. He was like, we don't really use it in our practice because they don't give you much more of anything else than just the old-fashioned anabolics would. And that kind of stinks. Now, hold on a second. Does it really stink that bad? Because what I'm saying is these SARMs are just different versions of like Anavar. That's dope. VAR is sweet. What's wrong with that? Well, I can think of a few things wrong with that. Probably about 3. First, direct studies on SARMs in the wild. Researchers purchase SARMs off the market and do analytical chemistry on them to figure out what's actually in them. Study after study has shown that something like as many as 50% of SARMs you can buy in the market either have SARMs and some other shit in it, and that other shit's almost always just oral steroids like Anavar, Dianabol, or something like that, or they just have oral steroids and there are no actual SARMs, or they just have some bullshit in there that's neither one of them and you ain't going to get any results or any effects because they're just being lied to. The thing is, if you have a source for legit, even just black market gear, like black market Anavar, that's probably a better bet than SARMs if you actually are getting what you actually are getting. So if we have this idea that like, yeah, they're roughly the same as VAR and all these other oral steroids, but when you get an oral steroid, you kind of know what you're getting. When you're getting a SARM, literally as measured by scientists, you just not know what we're getting now. Look, some labs fake gear. Fake gear is a thing. Much less now than it used to be 5 or 10 years ago. But look, even if they have an even chance of being fake, like what is the upside? Why am I risking this mystery if I already know that, where I get my gear, whatever, if United Kingdom, it's legal for personal use. If you're getting legit Anavar, like why would you risk getting not legit SARMs if it's just really no big upside? So that's point number one. Number two, Anavar and all these other steroids were mostly invented as early as the 1960s, some earlier, some a little bit later, but most research on new steroids stopped in the early 1970s. And so we've had lots of time and data on long-term effects of these drugs. A lot of these drugs are still approved for prescription in various parts of the world. We're talking about decades of stuff. And thus you're going to get minimal surprises. They know side effect profiles and downstream health consequences for most oral steroids really well because they're kind of like, in the pharmaceutical term, fucking ancient drugs, to be completely honest. But with SARMs, they're newer. We just don't know the long-term downsides. Now, look, not knowing long-term downsides is not by itself categorically like you should never take something. There's no reason to write SARMs off completely because all new drugs are unstudied in the long term. But that's where you start looking at trade-offs. New drugs and newer drugs, I was going to say Ozempic, but Ozempic's not new at all. It's been for decades used for diabetic management. It's just at a higher dose it works for obesity management. But there are newer drugs like tirzepatide, Zepbound or Mounjaro, as you might know them in your commercial wherewithal. Tirzepatide is a very new drug, but at least its main effect is so goddamn powerful and revolutionary, and its side effects are as measured so small and easy to manage. The novelty of the drug and the risk of like, is this going to fuck me up later is a very small, but also like, but what's the plus side? Well, the plus side, it's one hell of a drug that has no equal. What about SARMs? You take SARMs and they're new and they're not so well studied, but what's the upside? Well, there is no upside. It's kind of like oral anabolics. We already have those and we know their side effect profiles really well. So if SARMs were like 2 or 3 or 5 times better than oral anabolics, then we'd be like, all right, like we don't know much about these as much, but at least, hey, there's a fucking golden pot of gold to the end of the rainbow here. If you're just into the same class of effect and side effect, but the drug is new versus older, I don't know. And it's the thing. This almost never happens in the pharmaceutical industry writ large because every new generation of blood pressure med or diabetes med or psychiatric medication, it gets better. Like there's a new psychiatric drug out called Exua. And that's what was it? Gepirone or something like that. I'm going to get that one wrong. Exua is the brand name of the medication. It's a medication that is designed as an antidepressant for relatively severe cases of basically major depressive disorder. And it's fucking damn near magical. It works super well, but it also has very few side effects for real. And so it's just a better drug. So you say, well, I don't know if I want to take Exua compared to like Lexapro because Exua is newer and we don't know much about it as much for long-term trials. It's totally valid. But again, Exua does unbelievably cool shit that Lexapro does not do. So at least it's like, there's a trade-off there. But with SARMs, it's like, hey, we're new. And you're like, all right, what you got? We're like, nothing, man, same old shit, except we're mysterious. So you don't even know if we have downsides we haven't calculated yet. I don't know, man. It's kind of strange to do a new thing that doesn't have any upsides. If you're going to be new, you better be fucking better. Next, point number 3. Folks use SARMs thinking they are ducking steroids. How does this happen? Tons of people use supplements to help them get more jacked. Tons, way more than use steroids, which is a good thing. Most of those people would legally ethically, side effect, and health risk-wise just not use steroids. And these are all great reasons not to use steroids. But loads of these folks turn to SARMs because it's like taking a steroid, but with all the bad stuff missing, the ultimate hack. But if much of the steroid bad stuff comes along for the ride and the free pass promise of SARMs all of a sudden starts to take a huge hit, because like, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like TikTok teen trend type of trends that are going on. People want that anabolic, that secret sauce, but they don't want to say they're using steroids. They don't want to use steroids. They don't want all the side effects. So for a lot of those people, SARMs are like, wait. I can have steroid stuff, but I can still tell people I'm steroid free. And also I don't have to pay the health consequences. Well, it turns out, no, that's not actually what happens. And you do get some consequences, and they're similar to other drugs. And also, a lot of these drugs suppress your natural testosterone production. Fellas, let me tell you, you take SARMs for 8 weeks, you're going to get some fucking gains. Of course they work, right? But you're going to have some side effects too. And you're like, I didn't really sign up for this. And then guess what? You stop taking them, and then your testosterone is in the fucking can. Now, you could be one of these lucky type of people that a few weeks later you feel glorious, but you could be unlucky and a few months later you still don't feel right. And then you might, have suppressed your testosterone enough to where you need sort of medical intervention to help get it back up. That's nonsense. And if you're going to be suppressing your endogenous production, you sort of might as well be on real steroids at that point, because again, at least we understand them better. So for now, for the time being, video recorded in the fall of 2024. For now, SARMs probably aren't the saving grace of muscle growth that you're looking for. Star Wars shit. These are not the non-androgenic anabolics you are looking for. And the stormtrooper's like, but I want to get jacked. Sorry. Also, if you get jacked enough, Scott, explain to me how something works. You're familiar with stormtroopers in Star Wars, yes?
Of course.
If you're like really like, you're not stormtrooper 100% of your day, like there's a rec room and probably weights to lift, you get a mess hall. Sure. What if you get so jacked that your suit starts to get tight? Are you allowed to requisition like a new suit? Are you allowed to go to like the fucking guy in charge of your division and be like, I know we have these space suits that ostensibly are armored, but actually we just get shot with phaser guns, even though I don't know what the helmet is for. Apparently we can choke to death on fumes, but the helmet looks like a gas mask. All that aside, can your boy get a bigger suit? Do you think that's like reasonable? Or are they going to be like, dude, just stop fucking taking Anadrol every day and you're going to be fine?
Yeah, I think it's like F1 drivers. You have a little weight window where you're allowed to be.
Yeah.
You can be like 132 to 137 pounds.
Yeah, that's like the average stormtrooper weight.
Like your head is fucked for the helmet situation.
Me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. You're like, you guys have a helmet for me? Like, sorry, Israel, you're going to go into live fire with no helmet. I'm like, ah. But then I get to flip to my Amazo mode. Think I need a helmet? But seriously, I kind of want to stay anonymous in the Clone Wars, so at least wear a mask. Vampire mask. Yeah, Scott, you're probably right. That's how it works. I guess you guys talking at the barracks with those stormtroopers like, hey, what are you doing after your service? You're like, I'm telling you, man, getting fucking jacked. I'm tired of this bullshit. Stupid suit fits too tight. I can't wait. Throw away your notepad and your Excel sheets. The RP Hypertrophy app has all of your workouts displayed in one place with guided videos on exercise techniques and a program that evolves to better suit your needs the longer you use the app. All you have to do is follow the plan right on your phone and get the gains. Click on the link in the description of this video to get started. In any case, here's the thing. SARMs probably aren't the saving grace for muscle growth for now. That doesn't mean that some of the SARMs currently being used aren't very effective or won't end up being discovered as being very effective. That's very, very possible. And in the end, and by in the end, I mean in the next probably 5 to 10 years, hopefully, please God, sooner, non-androgenic anabolics like myostatin inhibitors are going to be hitting the market. What does that mean? It means that there's this molecule called myostatin, which means muscle stopper. I know. How have we not destroyed it in its entirety? This molecule is something your body makes automatically through your genetic code, and it caps muscle growth because it turns out the way your body, and this is kind of curious, the way your body runs the muscle growth process is your body always wants to grow muscle, but it has this molecule called myostatin that shushes it a little bit and mutes it down so that you don't get too jacked for your own goddamn good. But when you simply delete that gene, or you have a binding protein sit on there and make sure it doesn't get accessed, or you have some other kind of protein that nabs all the myostatin out from where it is in the cytoplasm and makes it ineffective, you end up, your body's like, hey, anything new today? Any memos? And your nucleus is like, yep. So you have that appointment with Stacy at 5. I think pink shirt is good. Yellow is fine. I'll put both up for you. You're like, thank you. All right. Dinner at 7 with Bob. You know Bob, he's great. Let's not let that last too long. And also full tilt muscle growth 24/7. Like, what the fuck? Really? Like, yeah, myostatin's gone. Like, oh shit. Hell yeah. That's real. That's how it really works in the body. So as soon as we have an elegant vector by which to turn down or turn off myostatin, we kind of solved whole body muscle growth. If you don't believe me, in cows, in greyhounds, and oh my God, they're so adorable little mice. They've already uncorked it, and these motherfuckers are IFBB pro. I mean, not even, like, just Google myostatin cow or double muscle cow. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, there's no human that's jacked human equivalent. Like, these cows are just like muscle everywhere. That is coming. It is inevitable, and it'll be here in less than a decade time, almost certainly. I wish that was SARMs, but it's not. So let's not confuse the eventual for the current, because the current situation is SARMs are just kind of like sort of mysterious, underpowered steroids that also have side effects, which blows. So then the question is, what do you have now as far as things that help you grow muscle? Well, kind of just lonely. It's really the RP Hypertrophy app, sitting there all by itself, eating its lunch. Go sit with the app. Introduce yourself. It's actually really nice, and maybe you can grow some muscle together. Anyway, SARMs are dope. I hope more effective drugs are on the way soon. But for now, this gets a rating of, See you guys next time.